The aroma of homemade lasagna wafted through the two-story colonial home, but Martha Wilson found no comfort in the familiar scent. At 72, her arthritic hands protested each careful layer of pasta ricotta and rich bolognese. The kitchen clock read 5:47 p.m., 13 minutes ahead of schedule, despite the throbbing in her wrists and the dull ache in her lower back. Perfection required sacrifice, and Martha had spent a lifetime mastering that particular equation. Through the kitchen doorway, Martha caught glimpses of her son Michael, arranging wine glasses on the dining table, the heavy mahogany piece she'd selected 15 years ago, when this house still felt like her home. Jennifer, her daughter-in-law, lounged in the living room, scrolling through her phone, occasionally calling out instructions without looking up. Martha added the final layer of cheese, pretending not to notice how Jennifer had rearranged all her kitchen cabinets last month without asking, claiming efficiency as the culprit. Martha slid the lasagna into the oven, setting the timer for 45 minutes. Just enough time to change into the navy dress Jennifer had deemed appropriate for tonight's dinner with Michael's boss. The dress hung in the small guest bedroom closet, her bedroom now, though the decor still screamed temporary space. 5 years of temporary. Martha sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floral wallpaper Jennifer had chosen. The walls seemed to inch closer with each passing month. The doorbell chimed at precisely 6:30 p.m. Martha smoothed her dress and made her final descent down the stairs as Michael welcomed Mr. Henderson and his wife into their home. Their home, not hers. Never truly hers, not anymore, though her life savings had purchased every brick and board. The thought lingered like an unwelcome guest as she plastered on her warmest smile. Mr. Henderson, a kind-faced man with salt and pepper hair, shook her hand firmly. "Such a pleasure to finally meet Michael's mother. I've heard so much about you." The words were pleasant enough, but Martha couldn't recall the last time Michael had mentioned her in any capacity beyond the woman who lived upstairs and cooked occasionally. She nodded graciously, accepting the polite fiction for what it was. Dinner proceeded with the expected small-talk discussions of market fluctuations and neighborhood developments. Martha carried the steaming lasagna to the table, her wrists screaming in protest. When she finally took her seat, the conversation had already moved on without her, like a train leaving a forgotten station. She took small, careful bites, savoring her own cooking, if not the company. Mr. Henderson eventually turned his attention to Martha, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Eleanor," he began, "Michael tells me you've been retired for a good while now. Are you enjoying your golden years?" Before Martha could form a reply, Jennifer released a dramatic, exasperated sigh. The sound sliced through the air, drawing every eye to her. A familiar blush crept up Martha's neck, the unwelcome herald of public humiliation. Jennifer set down her phone with a deliberate thud, fixing Mr. Henderson with a saccharine smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh, Mr. Henderson," she drawled, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Retirement is a very generous word for what Martha does. She mostly goes to doctors and picks up prescriptions. This old lady is only good for increasing our medicine bill." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. The lively chatter died instantly, replaced by a suffocating silence. Martha's ears burned and her cheeks flushed crimson. It felt as if a physical blow had landed, knocking the air from her lungs. Every guest, every colleague of Michael's was now looking at her, or perhaps pointedly away, unsure where to direct their gaze. Martha squeezed her trembling hands in her lap, praying that Michael, her only child, would stand up for her. A lifetime of sacrifices of unconditional love should surely earn her at least that much. She looked at him, her eyes pleading. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He cleared his throat, a nervous sound. He didn't meet her gaze. Instead, he forced a strained, awkward laugh. "Oh, Jennifer, you're so dramatic." He mumbled a weak attempt at humor that only made things worse. Then, without missing a beat, he turned to Mr. Henderson. "So about that new project, I was thinking we could approach it from a different angle." And just like that, he changed the subject, abandoning her, leaving her exposed and devastated. The food before her turned to ash. Martha ate nothing more, merely pushed the exquisite lasagna around her plate, a hollow ache in her chest, far outweighing the physical pain in her hands. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of polite noises and forced smiles, none of which reached her. When the guests finally departed, Martha began clearing the table. Jennifer breezed past, pausing only to mention that Martha had used too much oregano in the sauce. Michael retreated to his study without a word. That night, lying sleepless in the small, impersonal guest bedroom, a chilling realization crystallized within Martha. This wasn't her home anymore. The house she had poured her life savings into, the one she had lovingly gifted to Michael and Jennifer when they started their family, no longer welcomed her presence. She was an unwelcome guest, a burden, a charity case who only added to their medicine bill. The walls seemed to close in around her, echoing Jennifer's venomous words and Michael's cowardly silence. Martha reached for her nightstand drawer, pulling out the small leather album that contained what remained of her previous life. Richard smiled up at her from their wedding photo, his eyes crinkling at the corners, much like Mr. Henderson's had earlier that evening. Richard would never have allowed anyone to speak to her that way. But Richard had been gone for 8 years now, leaving Martha adrift in a world that increasingly had no place for her. She flipped through the pages, tracing a finger over the deed to the house that had been her pride, her security, her gift to her only son. A gift with stipulations she suddenly remembered. Martha sat up straighter, pulling the document closer under the dim bedside lamp. There, in careful legal language, lay a clause she had insisted upon but nearly forgotten. While the deed had been transferred to Michael's name, it retained a provision requiring her written consent for any sale of the property. At the time, it had seemed a mere formality, a safeguard she thought she'd never actually need. Now it felt like a lifeline, a gleaming sword in her trembling hands. The dawn broke, painting the sky with colors Martha couldn't appreciate. No one had come to check on her. No apology had been whispered. Not from Michael, not from Jennifer. The raw wound of the previous night festered, but it also opened the floodgates to years of smaller slights, forgotten birthdays, dismissive comments, and the countless times she had felt like an afterthought in her own son's life. As the sun climbed higher, a cold, fierce resolve began to crystallize within her, hardening the pain into purpose. There was a secret she had kept, a small independent nest egg from Richard's pension, carefully managed over the years, untouched by Michael or Jennifer's knowledge. And then there was the house, their house as they called it, but not entirely, not legally. Martha got out of bed, her movements stiff but determined. Her arthritic hands found their way to the old rotary phone on the small nightstand. She had kept the card for 6 months, almost on a whim, after seeing an advertisement in a magazine. Golden Sunset Realty, it read in elegant script. Martha dialed the number, her heart hammering against her ribs. Sunrise Realty. A cheerful voice answered. How can I help you today? Yes. Martha stated, her voice surprisingly steady. I'd like to speak to someone about selling a house. The agent paused, a beat of confusion in her voice. And which property are you referring to, ma'am? Is this your personal residence? Martha took a deep breath, the pain in her heart momentarily eclipsed by the burgeoning strength in her soul. No, she said, her voice firm and clear. Not anymore. The real estate agent, Mr. Donovan, was a man of impeccable tailored suits and a reassuring demeanor. They met 3 days after Martha's initial call, not at the house, but at a discreet coffee shop several towns over. Martha sat across from him, clutching her handbag, her heart aflutter with a mixture of apprehension and a strange, exhilarating hope. He listened patiently as she explained with carefully chosen words the circumstances of her living situation and her desire to sell the property. Then he laid out the legal documents, highlighting the crucial clause she had insisted upon years ago when she transferred the deed to Michael. It wasn't full co-ownership, but a provision that required her written consent for any sale of the property while she was still living. Mr. Donovan's confirmation of her partial legal rights to the house settled a deep tremor within Martha. This wasn't a desperate act. It was a right. He looked up from the papers, his brow furrowed with a hint of concern. Mrs. Wilson, he began, his voice gentle. Are you absolutely certain about this? Selling a home is a significant decision, especially under these circumstances. Martha met his gaze, her own eyes reflecting the steely resolve that had taken root in her heart. I'm certain, Mr. Donovan, she stated clearly. How quickly can we proceed? His initial surprise gave way to a professional nod. Very well, he said. I'll draw up the necessary paperwork. In the days that followed, Martha walked through the house with different eyes. Each room, each hallway suddenly carried 2 sets of memories, the vibrant past and the hollow present. In Michael's old bedroom, she ran her hand over a faded mark on the wall where his baseball bat had once accidentally connected during a particularly enthusiastic game. She could almost hear his childhood laughter. The living room held the ghost of Richard at his old piano, filling the space with melodies both joyful and melancholic. She remembered countless evenings curled up on the sofa reading stories to her grandchildren, Jason and Emma, their small heads nestled against her shoulder. But now the house felt cavernous, echoing with a silence that spoke volumes of her diminished place within its walls. Martha had become invisible, part of the furniture rarely addressed directly, her presence acknowledged only when something was needed from her. The bitter truth was she felt lonelier within these walls than she ever had living alone. Her decision wasn't just about reclaiming her dignity. It was about finding a place where she truly belonged, where she wouldn't vanish into the background of someone else's life. Simultaneously, Martha began exploring options for herself. The brochure for Silver Bay Apartments had caught her eye weeks ago, though she'd initially dismissed it as an impossible dream. A community for active seniors nestled by the ocean with pictures of vibrant residents engaged in pottery classes, walking groups, and communal dinners. The idea of living near the soothing sound of waves, surrounded by people who were choosing to live their golden years to the fullest, filled Martha with a youthful excitement she hadn't felt in decades. Mr. Donovan proved remarkably efficient. Within 2 weeks, the house was under contract, a quick sale he attributed to the buoyant market and its desirable location. The day Martha signed the final papers at his office, accepting a substantial cashier's check in return, she felt an almost dizzying sense of liberation mingled with a sharp pang of guilt. This was their home, after all. Michael had grown up here. His children visited on weekends. But the guilt receded as quickly as it had surfaced, washed away by the memory of Jennifer's cruel words and Michael's deafening silence. Martha secured a small 2-bedroom apartment at Silver Bay, just enough space for her and her chosen treasures. In the weeks leading up to her departure, she perfected the art of discreet packing. Most of the furniture, the heavy pieces that belonged to the house, she would leave behind. They were part of a life she was shedding. Instead, she focused on the irreplaceable, the worn leather photo albums chronicling generations of her family, the delicate jewelry her mother had passed down, Richard's intricately engraved pocket watch, and the patchwork quilt her grandmother had sewn, tangible pieces of love and history that could never be replaced. Each item was carefully wrapped, quietly tucked away in boxes she stored temporarily in the back of her closet, a clandestine operation carried out late at night when the house was silent and Michael and Jennifer were asleep. During the day, Martha maintained her usual routine, a masterclass in emotional camouflage. She listened to Jennifer's endless complaints about rising grocery prices, nodded at Michael's stresses at work, and smiled at their plans for the children. All the while, she held her incredible secret close, a warm, defiant ember in her chest. The sale would be finalized in 3 weeks, the day after the closing new owners would take possession. Martha had timed everything perfectly. All she needed now was the right moment to execute her escape. That opportunity presented itself sooner than expected. One evening, Michael came home buzzing with news. "Mom," he said, his voice more animated than it had been in weeks. "Emma's soccer team made it to the regional tournament in Philadelphia. We'll be gone the whole weekend." Jennifer was already compiling a list of snacks and supplies, barely acknowledging Martha's presence in the room. They were oblivious, wrapped up in their own family bubble, leaving the door wide open for her silent exit. Martha smiled and nodded, offering to help pack lunches for the trip. Inside, a quiet triumph flared. They had no idea how utterly irrelevant their plans would soon become to her future. The universe, it seemed, had decided to align itself with her cause. That Friday morning, Martha woke earlier than usual, her heart racing with anticipation. She moved through her morning routine with deliberate calm, making breakfast for the family as they rushed around, packing last-minute items. Emma hugged her briefly before being ushered into the car. Jason waved from the back seat. Michael called out a hasty goodbye, reminding her they'd be back Sunday evening. Jennifer didn't bother with farewells at all. As soon as their car pulled out of the driveway laden with suitcases and sporting gear, Martha made the call she'd rehearsed a dozen times in her mind. "Hello, this is Martha Wilson. My moving appointment is scheduled for this afternoon." Within hours, a small moving truck arrived. The driver, a young man with kind eyes, didn't ask questions when Martha explained she needed help loading just a few selected items. Her entire life, carefully curated over 72 years, now condensed into a few boxes and a handful of sentimental treasures, was loaded into its modest interior. Before she left, Martha placed a plain white envelope on the kitchen counter beneath a magnet of a smiling sunflower. Inside were the notarized sale papers and a brief, heartfelt note. "I've given all I can at Reed. Now I need to live what remains of my life. Don't try to find me. I'll contact you when I'm ready." Martha walked through the empty house one last time, a strange mix of sorrow and exhilaration washing over her. In the living room, a framed photograph of a younger Michael, beaming from his college graduation, caught her eye. She picked it up. ran her thumb over his smiling face. "I love you, my son," she whispered, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "But I can't be invisible anymore." Then she closed the door behind her for the last time. A waiting taxi took her away toward the promise of Silver Bay Apartments, toward a new life where she might finally be seen. The taxi pulled up to the entrance of Silver Bay Apartments, a collection of low-rise buildings painted in soothing shades of blue and white, perfectly blending with the coastal landscape. As Martha stepped out, a fresh, salty breeze kissed her face, carrying with it the distant murmur of the ocean. It felt like a cleansing breath washing away years of resentment and suffocating expectation. Martha paid the driver, retrieved her modest luggage, and turned to face her new beginning. The weight that had pressed down on her shoulders for so long, the invisible chains of obligation and unacknowledged sacrifice, finally lifted. A stirring of hope, fragile yet persistent, unfurled in her chest. The property manager, Ms. Ramirez, greeted Martha warmly, helping her complete the final paperwork for her new apartment. "Welcome to Silver Bay, Mrs. Wilson. We're delighted to have you join our community." Martha's throat tightened at the genuine welcome in the younger woman's voice, a stark contrast to the grudging tolerance she'd grown accustomed to. Ms. Ramirez led Martha to her new apartment on the second floor, unlocking the door with a flourish. "It's not large, but it has the best view in the complex." Martha stepped inside and gasped softly. The afternoon sunlight streamed through wide windows, illuminating the simple but elegant space. Beyond the small balcony, the vast expanse of the Atlantic stretched to the horizon, waves catching the golden light. Richard had always promised they'd retire by the sea, a dream that life's cruel twists had denied them. Yet here she was, living that dream, albeit alone. A bittersweet smile touched Martha's lips as she moved through the rooms, already envisioning where her treasured possessions would find their new homes. The movers arrived shortly after, carefully bringing in her boxes and the few furniture pieces she'd selected from her previous life. By evening, Martha had unpacked enough to make the space feel somewhat like home. She sat on her balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, sipping a cup of tea that tasted somehow better than any she'd had in years. Martha knew with absolute certainty that her phone would explode by Sunday night. Michael Jennifer, the realization of her absence and the revelation of the house sale, would undoubtedly send them into a frenzy. But for now, for these 2 precious days, she would savor the peace, the quiet, the profound sense of autonomy. Sunday evening arrived, heralded by a glorious sunset that bathed her new apartment in warm golden light. Martha spent the afternoon carefully arranging her few belongings, transforming the modest space into a true home. Her grandmother's quilt was draped over the armchair, the photo albums placed lovingly on a small side table, and Richard's watch, a silent sentinel, rested on the nightstand. At exactly 7:36 p.m., as the last sliver of the sun dipped below the horizon, Martha pictured them, Michael, Jennifer, Jason, and Emma, returning from their soccer tournament trip to an unexpectedly empty house. She imagined Michael walking into the kitchen, perhaps expecting her to be there, preparing a late dinner, or Jennifer calling out for her to fetch something. The note, the sale papers, they would find them soon enough. At 7:42 p.m., her phone resting innocently on the small dining table sprang to life. Michael's name flashed across the screen, a beacon of frantic concern. Martha watched it ring once, twice, 3 times. Each vibration seemed to release another drop of the tension she'd carried for years. She did not answer. It stopped, then immediately rang again, and again. Then the texts began to flood in a relentless barrage. "Mom, what is this? Call me now. What do you mean you sold the house? This isn't funny. Where are you?" The messages grew increasingly agitated, a mixture of disbelief, anger, and thinly veiled panic. Martha gently placed the phone down, silencing its insistent buzzing against the polished wood of the table. Her gaze drifted to the now twilight ocean, a vast expanse of calm compared to the storm she knew was brewing miles away. After an hour of this relentless assault, Martha picked up the phone. 97 missed calls, countless messages. She silenced it with a decisive tap, then tucked it away in a drawer. Out of sight, out of mind, at least for tonight. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now she had chosen peace. That night, lulled by the rhythmic crashing of waves against the shore, instead of the distant hum of complaints and unspoken resentments, Martha slept better than she had in years, deeply, peacefully, completely. Monday morning brought with it a sense of renewed purpose. Martha made herself a proper breakfast, scrambled eggs, crisp bacon, and a cup of freshly brewed coffee, luxuries she rarely afforded herself when living with Michael and Jennifer. She savored each bite, each sip a celebration of her newfound freedom. Just as she was finishing, a gentle knock sounded at her door. It was Sarah from apartment 3B, her face wreathed in a friendly smile. "Good morning, Martha. Hope I'm not disturbing you. Just wanted to see if you'd be interested in joining our book club. We meet every Monday afternoon." Martha's heart warmed at the simple invitation. "Why, Sarah?" She replied, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "I'd love to." The book club met in the communal lounge, a bright, airy room with large windows overlooking the ocean. A small group of women all around Martha's age welcomed her with genuine warmth. They discussed a novel about a woman who finds her true self after facing a monumental loss, a story that resonated deeply with Martha's own journey. Alice, a sharp-witted woman with twinkling eyes, complimented Martha's insight on the protagonist's journey. "You've got a real knack for understanding people's motivations, Martha. Have you always been a reader?" For the first time in a long time, Martha's words felt valued, her presence appreciated. By evening, after a truly fulfilling day, Martha cautiously retrieved her phone from the drawer. The screen immediately lit up, displaying a fresh wave of notifications. 63 new messages, 51 more calls. Michael's messages had grown increasingly frantic, bordering on desperate. "Mom, the locks are changed. What are we supposed to do? This isn't fair. Dad would be so disappointed in you right now." The mention of Richard, a blatant attempt at a guilt trip, stung, but no longer held the power to paralyze her. Martha took a deep breath, her fingers steady as she typed a short message. "I'm safe. I need time. Please respect that." She saw Michael's name flash on the screen, almost immediately attempting to call again. Martha declined the call. Then, with a profound sense of self-preservation, she turned off her phone completely. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of peace, full of possibility, full of Martha herself. The very first item on Martha's agenda after settling into Silver Bay was to visit Ms. Ramirez, the property manager. Her office, brightly lit and adorned with local seascapes, felt welcoming and professional. Martha explained her situation in general terms, her need for privacy, and her desire to limit contact from external parties. Ms. Ramirez, a woman with kind, understanding eyes, listened patiently, her expression never wavering. "Mrs. Wilson," she said, leaning forward slightly, her voice gentle but firm, "your privacy is absolutely protected here. Many of our residents have come to Silver Bay seeking a fresh start, a place to reclaim a bit of themselves. We understand and respect that completely. Consider this your sanctuary." Her words were a balm to Martha's raw nerves, a validation she hadn't realized she so desperately needed. It was as if the younger woman understood without Martha having to utter the messy details. Martha felt a profound sense of relief, a quiet gratitude for this haven. With that assurance, Martha began to explore her new world. Just a few blocks from her apartment, she discovered a charming independent bookstore, its windows brimming with new releases and cozy reading nooks. Next to it, a small cafe brewed the most aromatic coffee she had tasted in years, serving delicate pastries that melted in the mouth. The community center, a vibrant hub of activity, offered an array of classes, pottery, yoga art, even ballroom dancing. Each discovery felt like unwrapping a long-denied gift, a little piece of joy she had unknowingly been starved of. These were simple pleasures, yet they held immense weight, symbolizing the freedom to choose to experience, to simply be. By Wednesday, Martha knew it was time to check her phone again. The screen lit up with a familiar torrent of messages, more frantic than before. "Mom, please. We're worried sick. We don't understand. The kids keep asking for Grandma. Whatever we did, we can fix it. Just come home." Home. The word echoed bitterly in the quiet of her new apartment. That house, with its carefully chosen furniture and meticulously maintained garden, hadn't been her home for years. It had been a gilded cage, a stage where she played an unappreciated supporting role. The thought of returning to that stifling environment, to the constant emotional tightrope walk, sent a shiver down Martha's spine. But a question lingered, one she had pushed aside in the rush of her escape. Could she at 72 truly build a real home, one that was truly hers, free from the shadows of past hurts? As she looked out at the endless expanse of the ocean, the gentle lapping of waves, a constant lullaby, Martha felt a tremor of uncertainty, quickly followed by the salt-tinged promise of possibility. Yes, she could. She had to. A month into her new life at Silver Bay, Martha's days had undergone a profound transformation. Sunlight streamed into her apartment each morning, chasing away the lingering shadows of past anxieties. The ocean air, invigorating and clean, filled her lungs, bringing with it a noticeable decrease in the chronic stress that had plagued her. Her hands, though still arthritic, felt less stiff, less painful. It was as if her body was mirroring the lightness in her spirit. Martha had meticulously arranged her small apartment, carefully placing her treasured possessions, the old family photos, the antique porcelain figurines, the well-loved books. Each item now held a renewed significance, an anchor to her true self, no longer overshadowed by the imposing decor of Michael and Jennifer's house. It was modest, but it was entirely unapologetically hers. The book club had become a highlight of Martha's week. Sarah, with her infectious laugh and keen mind, had become a close confidant. Through her, Martha met others in the community, women and men who engaged in lively discussions, shared stories, and most importantly, listened intently. For the first time in what felt like decades, Martha was valued for her thoughts, her opinions, her very essence, not for her ability to provide a service or fill a perceived need. They saw Martha not Michael's mother or Jason and Emma's grandmother. One sunny morning, Sarah cornered Martha with a determined sparkle in her eye. "Martha, you've got to try Tai Chi. Walter is incredible, and it does wonders for flexibility." Just then, Walter himself, a retired naval officer with a gentle smile and surprisingly agile movements, walked by. "She's right, Martha," he encouraged. "It gets easier, and you'll feel more centered." Hesitantly, Martha joined them the next day. Walter, a serene man with graceful movements, led the class. Martha's arthritic hands and stiff joints protested, and she wobbled more than once, feeling clumsy and awkward. But as she attempted the slow, deliberate movements, focusing on her breath and the rhythm of her body, she felt a peculiar sense of calm, a deeper connection to herself. She wasn't just existing. She was truly feeling her body, moving it with intention. "It gets easier," Walter whispered to her after class, a reassuring smile on his face. He was right. With each passing session, Martha felt more alive than she had in years. She cautiously shared only the bare outline of her past with her new friends, the broad strokes of a difficult family situation, nothing more. They offered quiet support, understanding nods, never prying, never judging. In their accepting company, surrounded by their genuine warmth, Martha slowly began to recognize glimpses of the woman she used to be. The Martha who was independent, curious and resilient before years of neglect had chipped away at her core. Michael's calls had predictably lessened to weekly texts, their tone oscillating between thinly veiled guilt flashes of anger and a more insistent, almost bewildered concern. Martha responded sparingly a brief "I'm fine" or "I need more time" maintaining the firm boundary she had established. The messages from her grandchildren, however, were a different matter entirely. Jason's crude drawings of houses by the sea and Emma's sweet recorded voice messages, asking when Grandma was coming home, pierced Martha's heart with a familiar ache. She loved them fiercely, but she knew she couldn't return to that environment not yet, not until Michael and Jennifer understood the depth of the hurt they had inflicted, and not until she was stronger in her own right. "Healing doesn't mean you have to cut them off forever," Martha Sarah mused one afternoon, sensing Martha's inner conflict. "It just means you have to heal yourself first." I know Martha admitted a rare moment of vulnerability escaping her. "It's just, I don't know who I am outside of that. Outside of being their mother, their grandmother, their burden." Later that week in the art class, Martha had bravely signed up for Clara. The watercolor instructor approached her easel. Martha had been struggling with a seascape, trying to capture the subtle nuances of the ocean's many moods. Clara looked at her painting, then at Martha herself. "Martha," she said softly, "you have a natural eye, a real sensitivity. You see what others miss." Her words resonated deeply. Martha had always believed she possessed that gift, the ability to see potential in others, to nurture their growth. But in her relentless focus on everyone else, she had utterly failed to see her own value, to nurture her own self. That realization hit her with the force of a tidal wave, both devastating and cleansing. 2 months into her life at Silver Bay, a text from Michael popped up, startling Martha with its unexpected content. "Mom, I was looking through some old medical records. You still have that heart condition, right? Mitral valve issues. Have you been keeping up with your checkups? Just worried." It was a level of concern he had rarely, if ever, demonstrated before. Martha smiled a genuine, serene smile. "Yes, Michael," she typed back. "I'm seeing Dr. Lee here. My numbers are all improved, actually. She says it's likely due to less stress." She sent the message, then turned to her watercolor palette, say, ready to paint the vibrant sunset she now saw every evening from her window. For the first time in years, Martha felt truly visible to herself, to her new friends, and perhaps in time even to her son. The future stretched before her, like the vast ocean, sometimes turbulent, often mysterious, but always full of possibility. A crisp October morning found Martha perched on her balcony at Silver Bay, watching amber leaves spiral down from the coastal maples that dotted the property. 3 months had passed since her dramatic departure each day, adding another brushstroke to the canvas of her reimagined life. The initial euphoria of escape had mellowed into something more sustainable, a quiet contentment punctuated by moments of genuine joy. Today marked her first official day as a volunteer at the Silver Bay Library, reading to children during Wednesday story hour. Martha smoothed the front of her new azure blouse, a color Jennifer had always claimed made her look washed out, and studied her reflection in the balcony door's glass. The ocean air had brought a healthy flush to her cheeks, and her silver hair, now styled in a modern bob instead of the severe bun Jennifer had preferred, caught the morning light. Sometimes glancing at herself unexpectedly like this, Martha barely recognized the woman staring back, not because she looked so different physically, but because the perpetual shadow of apology had lifted from her expression. The gentle chime of her phone interrupted her reverie. Martha tensed instinctively. Michael's weekly text had already come and gone on Sunday, his tone marginally less accusatory than previous messages. This unexpected contact rippled through her hard-won tranquility like a stone disturbing still water. She hesitated, then checked the screen. The message wasn't from Michael, but from Dr. Lee's office, confirming her cardiology appointment that afternoon. Martha exhaled slowly. Her mitral valve condition, manageable but chronic, required quarterly monitoring. In her rush to escape, she'd neglected her August checkup. Freedom had its responsibilities, after all. Martha gathered her tote bag filled with children's books she'd selected for story hour. As she locked her apartment door, she noticed Sarah approaching from down the hall, an unusual urgency in her normally relaxed stride. "Martha, you won't believe what's happening." Sarah's voice dropped to a theatrical whisper as she drew closer. "There's a man asking questions about you at the front desk. Says he's a private investigator. He's showing your picture around." The blood drained from Martha's face. The security of her new life suddenly felt as fragile as a soap bubble. Michael had found her, or was trying to. She gripped the door handle to steady herself, mind racing. What did this mean? What would happen now? The carefully constructed piece she'd built these past months seemed to shudder at its foundations. What should I do? Martha's whisper matched Sarah's, a conspiracy of two in the sunlit hallway. Sarah squared her shoulders, the former elementary school principal emerging in her posture. "You do nothing. You go to story hour like you planned. I'll handle this. He doesn't know which apartment is yours, and Consuelo at the desk won't tell him without your permission." Martha squeezed Sarah's hand in wordless gratitude. The friendship that had blossomed between them over weekly book club meetings and morning walks along the shore had become one of Martha's most treasured gifts. Sarah understood the value of second chapters in life. Her own story included a late-in-life divorce and reinvention. True to Sarah's word, the private investigator was nowhere to be seen when Martha slipped out a side entrance. The Silver Bay Community Library occupied a charming converted boathouse at the edge of the property, its windows offering panoramic ocean views. Inside, a semicircle of small chairs awaited the preschool group from a nearby daycare center. Martha arranged her books on the reading stand, selecting The Runaway Bunny as her opening story, a tale of independence that always ended in loving reunion. The irony wasn't lost on her. The children arrived in a flurry of excited chatter, their teacher gently herding them toward the reading area. Martha felt her anxiety melt away as 15 pairs of wide eyes fastened on her expectantly. This was why she'd volunteered to feel useful, to share her love of stories, to build something meaningful in her new community. For the next 45 minutes, private investigators and family drama faded into insignificance as Martha transported her young audience into the world of mischievous bunnies and patient mother rabbits. When story hour ended, Martha lingered, helping the teacher gather wayward mittens and tiny backpacks. Through the library's wide windows, she spotted a man in a suit standing near the parking lot checking his phone. Something in his posture, professional, patient, observant, triggered an internal alarm. Martha ducked behind a bookshelf, pulse quickening. This had to be him, the investigator Michael had hired. Martha waited until the children's bus pulled away, then called Sarah. The man in the parking lot moved purposefully toward the library entrance. Martha slipped into the staff room, panic rising in her throat. Sarah answered on the first ring. Through the small window, Martha watched the investigator enter the library, speak briefly with the librarian, then scan the room with practiced efficiency. "Stay where you are." Sarah's voice was calm but firm. "Walter and I are coming to get you. We'll go through the back door to his car." 5 minutes later, Walter's silver Honda pulled up behind the library. Martha slipped out the staff exit, hunching low across the rear seat. A wordless look passed between Walter and Sarah, concern mixed with something else Martha couldn't quite identify. They drove in silence back to the apartments, using the service entrance to avoid the main lobby. Once safely inside Martha's apartment, the tension broke. Walter paced by the windows, peering occasionally through the blinds. Unshakable in his Tai Chi class, he now radiated protective energy that reminded Martha of Richard. Sarah made tea, the familiar ritual bringing comfort to the unsettled room. Martha sank onto her sofa, the emotional whiplash of the morning catching up with her. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, wrapping her hands around the warm teacup Sarah offered. "I'm a 72-year-old woman hiding like some criminal. From my own son." Walter turned from the window, his expression softening. "Not from your son, Martha. From having choices made for you. There's a difference. Sometimes running isn't cowardice. It's the first step toward standing your ground." Martha absorbed his words, finding unexpected solace in them. Walter rarely spoke about his past, but fragments shared during their morning Tai Chi sessions hinted at his own battles: a difficult military career, a son lost to addiction, years spent finding his way back to peace. The private investigator's presence shattered the illusion that Martha could simply disappear from her old life. Sooner or later, she would have to face Michael, to explain her actions, to stand her ground, as Walter had said. But not today. Today, she had a cardiology appointment, a sunset watercolor class, and friends who formed a protective barrier around her newfound independence. Martha arrived at Dr. Lee's office that afternoon, still rattled from the morning's events. Her blood pressure readings reflected her anxiety significantly higher than her last visit. Dr. Lee, a petite woman with a no-nonsense manner and eyes that missed nothing, frowned at the numbers. "Something stressing you out?" Mrs. Wilson, Dr. Lee asked as she positioned the stethoscope against Martha's chest. Martha hesitated, then offered a sanitized version of recent events. Dr. Lee listened without interruption, her focus seemingly on Martha's heartbeat, but her sharp gaze periodically meeting Martha's eyes. When the examination concluded, Dr. Lee sat across from Martha, her expression grave. "Your mitral valve regurgitation has progressed, Mrs. Wilson. I'm hearing a more pronounced murmur than before, and these echo results confirm it. Combined with your blood pressure readings today, I'm concerned." Martha's hands tightened in her lap. "What does that mean exactly?" Dr. Lee tapped her tablet, bringing up Martha's test results. "Nothing immediately catastrophic, but definitely cause for more vigilant monitoring. I want to adjust your medication and see you again in 6 weeks rather than 3 months. And this is important, you need to manage your stress levels better. Whatever family situation you're dealing with, try to find a calmer approach. Your heart is telling you it needs gentler handling." The irony tasted bitter on Martha's tongue. She'd left Michael's house partly to escape the constant stress that had become her daily companion. Now it seemed that very escape had created new stresses that threatened her health just as severely. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She couldn't run forever. Sooner or later, she would have to face the past to secure her future. Martha was still absorbing Dr. Lee's words when her phone vibrated in her purse. A text from Sarah. "He's gone. Coast clear. But he left his card with Consuelo for you." Relief washed over Martha, followed immediately by confusion. Why would the investigator leave his card if he knew where she lived? Why not simply report back to Michael, unless he wanted to speak with her directly first? The thought was both unsettling and strangely compelling. When Martha returned to Silver Bay, she retrieved the business card from the front desk. "Robert Garcia Private Investigations," it read in clean professional type. Martha slipped it into her wallet, not yet ready to decide what to do with it, but unwilling to simply throw it away. That evening, she skipped the watercolor class, her conversation with Dr. Lee weighing too heavily on her mind. Instead, she sat on her balcony watching the sunset paint the ocean in fiery oranges and deepening purples, trying to imagine what a calmer approach to her family situation might look like. The following morning brought a fresh challenge. As Martha returned from her walk along the shore, she spotted a familiar figure in the Silver Bay lobby, not the investigator this time, but Michael himself, deep in conversation with Consuelo at the reception desk. Martha froze half hidden behind a decorative palm. Her son looked thinner than she remembered his normally meticulous appearance, slightly rumpled as though he'd dressed hastily or slept poorly. Martha's heart thudded painfully in her chest, Dr. Lee's warnings echoing in her mind. She couldn't avoid this confrontation Michael had found her, but she could control where and how it happened. Taking a deep breath, Martha stepped back outside before Michael could spot her. With shaking fingers, she called the number on Robert Garcia's business card. He answered on the third ring. "Mrs. Wilson, I was hoping you'd call." Something in his tone, professional but kind, steadied Martha's nerves. "You found me for my son," she stated simply. "Well, he's here now at Silver Bay, but I'm not ready to see him yet. Not like this, not on his terms." A brief pause followed. "That's not exactly how this works, Mrs. Wilson. Your son hired me to locate you, which I've done." Martha gripped the phone tighter. "Mr. Garcia, I don't know you, but I'm asking for a small courtesy. I need neutral ground for this meeting, not my home. Not yet. I also need time to prepare myself. My doctor yesterday was quite clear about managing my stress levels due to my heart condition." Another pause, longer this time. "What are you proposing?" Relief softened Martha's voice. "Tell him you've confirmed I live here but haven't made direct contact. Suggest meeting somewhere public, the Oceanside Cafe on Harbor Street perhaps. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Just him, not Jennifer or the children. I need to have this first conversation with my son alone." Garcia's agreement came with palpable reluctance. "This is irregular, Mrs. Wilson, but I understand the need for managing difficult family conversations. I'll speak with your son." Martha ended the call, her hands still trembling but her mind clearer. She had 24 hours to prepare for seeing Michael again. 24 hours to find the words that might bridge the chasm between them without sacrificing the independence she'd fought so hard to claim. Word of Martha's impending meeting spread quickly through her small circle of Silver Bay friends. That evening, Sarah, Walter, and Clara from the watercolor class gathered in Martha's apartment for what Sarah jokingly called a strategy session. They brought food: Walter's homemade clam chowder, Clara's sourdough bread, Sarah's apple pie, and something infinitely more valuable, their unwavering support. Walter poured wine for everyone except Martha, who stuck to sparkling water on doctor's orders. To facing the past without surrendering the present, he toasted, raising his glass. The others echoed the sentiment, their faces reflecting both concern and pride. For 2 hours they listened as Martha rehearsed what she might say to Michael, offering gentle suggestions and occasional challenges when her resolve seemed to waver. By evening's end, Martha felt armored in friendship stronger than she would have believed possible 3 months ago when she first arrived at Silver Bay, broken and uncertain. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, a perfect autumn day that belied Martha's inner turbulence. She dressed carefully, selecting a teal blouse that brought out the blue in her eyes and a pair of comfortable slacks. Her new silver earrings, a birthday gift from Walter, caught the light as she fastened them. Martha studied her reflection, barely recognizing the confident woman staring back. Silver Bay had transformed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. Sarah insisted on driving Martha to the Oceanside Cafe, refusing to hear any protests. "I'll be at the bookstore across the street," she announced as they pulled into a parking space. "If you need me, just text. 1 word is enough." Martha hugged her friend, gratitude closing her throat. Then she squared her shoulders and entered the cafe. She chose a corner table with a view of both the ocean and the entrance, ordering chamomile tea to calm her nerves. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. At precisely 1:58 p.m., Michael pushed through the cafe door. Martha watched him scan the room, his gaze passing over her at first, then returning with a start of recognition. He looked simultaneously like a stranger, and the little boy she had raised, familiar features rearranged by stress and surprise. The contradiction made her heart ache in a way unrelated to her medical condition. Michael approached slowly as though afraid she might bolt. "Mom..." He began, his voice softer than Martha expected, almost tentative. You look different." Martha gestured to the chair across from her, keeping her expression neutral, despite the emotional tsunami threatening to overwhelm her defenses. "I am different, Michael. Please sit down." He slid into the seat, ordering black coffee when the waitress appeared, his eyes never leaving Martha's face. His hands fidgeted with a paper napkin, folding and unfolding it in a nervous gesture she recognized from his childhood. The silence stretched between them, 20 years of unspoken grievances crystallizing in the space of heartbeats. "How did you find me?" Martha finally asked, breaking the tension. Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair, another familiar gesture that tugged at her heart. I hired someone. A private investigator. I had to, Mom. You disappeared. You sold our house and vanished. Who does that? Someone who's been invisible for too long. Martha responded quietly, the words hanging in the air between them. Michael flushed, his jaw tightening in the way it always did when he felt defensive. This isn't about revenge, is it, Mom? His voice hardened. Because if it is, mission accomplished. We're staying with Jennifer's parents. It's not exactly ideal. The kids miss their home, they miss you. Martha took a slow breath, remembering Dr. Lee's warning about stress. Michael, this meeting won't work if you're going to twist my words and accuse me. I didn't come here to be attacked. He visibly reined himself in, taking a deep breath. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just lost and angry. Jennifer shouldn't have said what she said about the medicine bills. She knows that? He finally met her gaze, a flicker of remorse in his eyes. Martha studied him, seeing for the first time the toll the past months had taken. Dark circles shadowed his eyes and new lines bracketed his mouth. Despite everything, she felt a surge of maternal concern. It wasn't just what she said that night. Martha replied, the words flowing with a quiet conviction that surprised even her. It was years of small cruelties, of being overlooked, of being treated like an afterthought in my own home, the home I gave you. She reminded him of his promise made years ago when she transferred the deed that he would always take care of her. Michael bristled slightly. I thought I was Mom. We gave you a place to live, didn't we? A roof over your head? Is that all you think I needed? Martha challenged, her voice rising slightly. A roof over my head. What about respect, Michael? What about appreciation? What about being seen and heard and valued? He looked away, muttering about their busy lives, his demanding job, Jennifer's hands full with the children. Martha pressed on, unwilling to let him retreat into excuses. In your silence that night, when Jennifer publicly humiliated me in front of your colleagues, your friends, you just laughed awkwardly and changed the subject. You left me there, Michael, all alone. Michael finally looked at her, shame coloring his face. I never thought of it that way, he admitted, his voice barely audible above the cafe's ambient noise. That's the problem, Martha concluded, the weight of years of unspoken pain evident in her voice. You didn't think about me at all. He leaned back in his chair, visibly deflated. So this was your plan, to cash out and leave us scrambling? No, Martha corrected firmly, shaking her head. This was survival. I didn't leave to hurt you. I left because staying was hurting me. It was slowly, painfully eroding who I was. Michael ran his hand through his hair again, looking utterly defeated. We're staying with Jennifer's parents, he repeated, the admission laced with exhaustion. It's not easy. Emma cries for you. Jason asks when Grandma is coming back. I miss you too, Mom. His raw honesty, the pain in his eyes, made Martha's resolve waver. The mother in her yearned to reach out to comfort him, to make everything right. But the stronger, newer Martha held firm. I'm not coming back, Michael, she stated, her voice softer but unwavering. Not to live with you. I've made a life here, a good life. Michael reached across the table, his hand hovering before gently resting on hers. Just give us a chance to make things right, Mom. Please. Martha looked at his hand, then back at his pleading face. What does making things right look like to you, Michael? He struggled for words, his gaze falling to his coffee cup. I don't know exactly, but Emma and Jason need their grandmother, and I need my mother. This whole thing, it's forced a lot of hard conversations. Jennifer's been difficult, but even she's had to confront some things. Martha studied her son, searching for sincerity beneath the obvious desperation. I won't be disrespected again, Michael. That's non-negotiable. He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. I get it, Mom. I really do. He then looked up, hope dawning in his expression. Would you be willing to meet the kids? Just for a little while. Martha paused, the image of Emma's drawings and Jason's voice messages flashing through her mind. Yes, she finally agreed, a small tentative smile touching her lips. At the park, perhaps. Neutral ground, just them and you at first. Relief washed over Michael's face, a profound release of tension that made him look years younger. The change reminded Martha how heavily this rift had weighed on him despite his initial anger. Whatever his failings, Michael was still her son, and some part of her would always respond to his pain. Their conversation continued for another hour, moving gradually from recrimination to tentative reconciliation. Michael shared stories of Emma's soccer triumphs and Jason's growing interest in marine biology, a passion ignited during a school field trip to an aquarium. Martha, in turn, told him about her watercolor classes and her volunteer work at the library, carefully omitting details about her health concerns. That conversation would come later when trust had been more fully rebuilt. As they prepared to leave, Michael hesitated, then asked the question Martha had been dreading. "And Jennifer, will you see her too eventually?" Martha gathered her purse, buying time to formulate her response. "Not yet, Michael. I'm not ready for that. One step at a time." He nodded, disappointment evident, but acceptance gradually replacing it. "She's seeing someone he offered unexpectedly. A therapist. Since you left. She says she's trying to understand why she treated you the way she did." Something about patterns from her own mother. Martha absorbed this information with surprise. The Jennifer she knew would sooner walk barefoot over broken glass than admit to needing psychological help. Perhaps her departure had catalyzed changes beyond what she'd imagined possible. They parted with an awkward hug, neither fully comfortable with the physical contact, but both recognizing its necessity. Martha watched Michael walk to his car, his posture straighter than when he'd arrived, as though some burden had been partially lifted. She felt the same curious lightness mixed with the fatigue that always followed emotional exertion. Sarah waited patiently in her car outside the bookstore, pretending to read, but obviously watching for Martha's emergence from the cafe. She didn't immediately pepper Martha with questions, simply drove them back to Silver Bay in companionable silence. Only when they were safely inside Martha's apartment did she finally ask, "How did it go?" Martha sank onto her sofa, emotional exhaustion catching up with her. "We're meeting the grandchildren this weekend, at the park near here." Martha's voice trembled slightly. "I'm nervous, Sarah. What if they're angry with me too? What if they've been told I abandoned them?" Sarah sat beside her, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "Children are more resilient and understanding than we give them credit for, and they haven't been poisoned by years of adult complications. They'll just be happy to see their grandmother." Martha nodded, wanting to believe this, but still harboring doubts. The reunion with Emma and Jason now loomed in her mind, simultaneously desired and feared. She loved her grandchildren fiercely and had missed them every day of her self-imposed exile. But she also feared what they might have been told, how they might have interpreted her absence. That night, Martha slept fitfully, her dreams a confused jumble of past and present. In one particularly vivid sequence, she stood in the kitchen of Michael and Jennifer's house, invisible and shouting, while everyone moved around her, as though she weren't there. She woke, gasping, her heart racing uncomfortably in her chest. Martha switched on her bedside lamp, trying to calm her breathing, as Dr. Lee had taught her. The digital clock read 3:17 a.m. Too early to rise, too agitated to return to sleep. She reached for the sketchbook she kept beside her bed, a habit she'd developed since starting watercolor classes. Drawing often soothed her when anxiety struck. As the pale gray light of dawn filtered through her curtains, Martha set down her pencil and studied what she'd created, a detailed sketch of a small cottage by the sea with a garden path leading to the door. It wasn't Silver Bay Apartments, nor was it Michael's house. It was something new, something that existed only in her imagination, or perhaps she realized with a start in her hopes for the future. The reunion with Emma and Jason at the local beach park was both joyous and painfully brief. As Michael led them toward her, Emma spotted Martha first, her face lighting up with unbridled delight. "Grandma, Grandma," she shrieked, racing across the sand, her arms outstretched. Martha knelt, catching her granddaughter in a fierce hug, tears stinging her eyes. Jason, more cautious at 8 years old, approached slowly, his thumb in his mouth, a habit Martha thought he'd outgrown years ago. He studied her new haircut with solemn eyes. "You look like a mermaid queen, Grandma," he mumbled, before finally allowing himself a tentative hug. The afternoon passed in a blur of sandcastles, seashell collecting, and ice cream cones. Michael kept a respectful distance, allowing Martha uninterrupted time with the children. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the beach, Emma looked up at Martha, her young face suddenly serious. "Are you coming home now, Grandma?" she asked, her voice tinged with a child's innocent hope. Martha's heart constricted. She had prepared for this question, but still found herself momentarily speechless in the face of Emma's directness. "This is my home now, sweetheart," she finally explained, stroking Emma's hair. "But I promise we can see each other often. Very often." A small tear welled in Emma's eye, but she nodded, accepting this answer with surprising maturity. Martha glanced at Michael, who stood a few yards away watching the exchange. Their eyes met in a moment of shared understanding. Neither had expected Emma to accept the situation so readily. As they said their goodbyes, Jason pressed a small object into Martha's hand, a perfect spiral seashell he'd found during their beachcombing. "For your new house, Grandma," he whispered, "so you don't forget the ocean when you're inside." Martha clutched the shell, its smooth surface cool against her palm. "I'll keep it on my windowsill, Jason, so I can see it every morning when I wake up." Michael helped the children into his car, then turned to Martha with an expression she couldn't quite read. Part gratitude, part lingering hurt, part cautious hope. "They'll want to see you again soon," he said simply. Martha nodded, already feeling the emotional toll of the afternoon. Soon, she agreed. "But not next weekend. I need time to process all this." Michael's face fell slightly, but he didn't argue. She watched them drive away, Emma's small hand waving frantically from the back window, until the car disappeared around a bend in the coastal road. Martha walked slowly back to her apartment, the shell clutched in her hand like a talisman. The meeting had gone better than she dared hope, but it had also drained her completely. Her grandchildren still loved her, still accepted her, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the first skirmish in a longer war, one that would eventually require confronting Jennifer and the deeper wounds that remained unhealed. As Martha rounded the corner to her building, she spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench near the entrance. Not Michael returned, as her racing heart first feared, but Walter apparently waiting for her. He stood as she approached, concern evident in his expression. "You look exhausted," he observed, offering his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. Martha accepted gratefully, suddenly aware of how truly tired she felt. "They're still my grandchildren," she murmured as they walked slowly toward the entrance. "That hasn't changed despite everything else." Walter nodded, understanding without need for elaboration. The simplest relationships often survive the most complicated situations. He replied, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. Children especially have a remarkable ability to love without conditions or grudges. Inside her apartment, Martha placed Jason's seashell on her windowsill exactly as promised, positioning it to catch the late afternoon light. Its spiral pattern reminded her of her own life's journey, moving outward in ever-widening circles from a fixed center, yet always connected to its origin. She was still Emma and Jason's grandmother, still Michael's mother, but she was also finally Martha Wilson in her own right, a woman with friendships, passions, and a future entirely her own. The seasons turned at Silver Bay Autumn's fiery display, yielding to winter's stark beauty. December brought holiday decorations to the community's common areas, tasteful wreaths and twinkling lights that transformed the already charming spaces into something magical. For Martha, the approaching holiday season carried equal measures of anticipation and dread. Her weekly meetings with Emma and Jason had become the anchoring points of her calendar, but Christmas loomed as an emotional minefield she wasn't sure how to navigate. On the first Sunday in December, Martha sat in the community lounge with her friends, nursing a cup of spiced cider as a rare New England snowfall dusted the shoreline beyond the windows. Sarah and Walter had become her chosen family, their Sunday afternoon gatherings a ritual that restored her spirit after each visit with her grandchildren. Today, Clara, from watercolor class, and Bernard, a retired English professor who had recently joined their book club, completed their circle. Martha's fingers traced the rim of her mug, her gaze distant. Michael had texted that morning, his message deceptively casual. "The kids are hoping you'll join us for Christmas Eve. Just dinner, nothing fancy. Jennifer says you're welcome." The invitation, her first to enter their new home, had thrown her off balance. 6 months ago, Martha would have given anything to hear those words, to be included rather than tolerated. Now the prospect filled her with conflicting emotions she couldn't fully untangle. "What troubles you?" Martha Bernard's voice, gentle yet penetrating, broke through her reverie. In the short time since joining their group, he had revealed an uncanny ability to read emotional undercurrents. His question opened the floodgates, and Martha found herself sharing the invitation, her fears, and the persistent pull of familial obligation that threatened to undermine her hard-won independence. The group listened without interruption, their faces reflecting various shades of concern and understanding. When Martha finished, Walter leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped loosely between his knees. "Going back doesn't mean surrendering what you've built here, Martha. A bridge can connect two places without destroying either shore." His words settled over her like a warm blanket, offering comfort and clarity in equal measure. The others nodded in agreement, but it was Clara who asked the question Martha had been avoiding. And what about Jennifer? Have you spoken directly since everything happened? Martha shook her head, a knot tightening in her stomach. Not once. Michael says she's seeing a therapist, that she's working through issues related to her own mother. But I haven't heard a word of apology or explanation from her directly. Perhaps that's exactly what Christmas Eve could provide. Sarah suggested, her practical nature asserting itself. A controlled environment, the children as buffers, and a clear time limit. You arrive at 6, leave by 9. 3 hours to test whether genuine change is possible. Martha considered this perspective, feeling the wisdom in it. Dr. Lee had emphasized during her last checkup that avoidance wasn't a sustainable long-term strategy for stress management. Perhaps facing Jennifer in a supervised setting was a necessary step in her healing journey, regardless of the outcome. I'll think about it, Martha promised, knowing her friends would respect her decision either way. That was the gift of these new relationships: unconditional support, without the suffocating weight of expectation. The following Thursday brought Martha's weekly watercolor class, now held in the community center's sunlit studio rather than on the beach due to the winter chill. Clara had convinced Martha to enter a piece in the upcoming Silver Bay Winter Art Show, a seascape that captured the moody Atlantic in late autumn, the horizon line blurred where gray water met equally gray sky. As Martha added final touches to her painting, Clara circulated through the room, offering individualized guidance to each student. When she reached Martha's easel, Clara paused longer than usual, her head tilting as she studied the canvas. There's something new here, she observed quietly. A depth that wasn't present in your earlier work. You're no longer painting what you see, Martha. You're painting what you feel. Martha stepped back from her canvas, considering Clara's assessment. The seascape did carry an emotional weight that transcended mere technical skill. The churning water, the indistinct boundary between sea and sky, the single seabird silhouetted against the gathering storm, all reflected her internal landscape as much as the physical world. Clara squeezed Martha's shoulder gently. This is the one for the show? It tells a truth that reaches beyond technique. Martha nodded, a mixture of pride and vulnerability washing over her. To display her work publicly felt like another form of exposure, another risk. But wasn't that the essence of her new life? Taking chances, stepping beyond comfortable boundaries, revealing her authentic self to the world. After class, Martha walked slowly along the indoor promenade that overlooked the winter beach. The glass walls provided protection from the biting wind while preserving the stunning coastal view. She spotted Walter at his usual bench, seemingly impervious to the cold, as he watched the waves crash against the shore. Without conscious decision, her steps turned in his direction. Walter looked up as she approached, a smile warming his features. He patted the space beside him on the bench. I was hoping you might find your way here today. Martha settled beside him, grateful for the woolen scarf that protected her from the draft seeping through the glass. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, watching the restless ocean. Walter had become an increasingly important presence in Martha's life, a friend whose quiet strength and hard-earned wisdom often provided exactly the perspective she needed. They shared morning Tai Chi, attended concerts at the community center, and occasionally dined together in the Silver Bay Cafe. Yet a certain careful distance had persisted between them, an unspoken boundary that neither had attempted to cross. I've decided to accept Michael's Christmas Eve invitation, Martha announced, surprised by her own certainty. Walter nodded, his expression revealing neither approval nor concern. A natural next step, he remarked simply. Martha turned slightly to face him. Would you come with me? The words escaped before she could fully consider their implications. Walter's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. To your family Christmas. That's hardly appropriate, Martha. They don't know me. Martha twisted her hands in her lap, suddenly feeling foolish yet unwilling to retract the invitation. They know of you. I've mentioned my friends here, and having someone who understands the situation, it would make it easier. But she could hear the selfishness in her request, asking Walter to spend his holiday evening as her emotional support rather than pursuing his own celebrations. Walter was silent for a long moment, his gaze returning to the winter sea. I have no family obligations for Christmas Eve, he finally said. His voice held no pity, just matter-of-fact acceptance. If you truly believe my presence would help rather than complicate matters, I'm willing. But I'd suggest an alternative. I could drive you there, perhaps join for coffee or dessert toward the end of the evening. That gives you privacy for the important conversations while still providing backup. Relief flooded through Martha. Walter's counterproposal was perfect, thoughtful support without overstepping boundaries. "Thank you," she breathed impulsively, covering his hand with hers. His skin felt warm despite the chill air. Walter turned his palm upward, clasping her fingers lightly. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a silent acknowledgement of feelings that had been building gradually over months of shared walks and conversations. Neither spoke of it directly, but as they continued to watch the winter ocean, their hands remained linked, a small but significant bridge between separate lives. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, Martha divided her energy between preparations for the Silver Bay Winter Art Show and increasingly anxiety-provoking thoughts about the holiday dinner. Sarah accompanied her shopping for a suitable gift for Jennifer, a task that proved unexpectedly challenging. Every potential item seemed laden with subtext Martha didn't intend. Too expensive might appear as showing off. Too impersonal could signal continued resentment. Too intimate might presume a closeness that didn't exist. They finally settled on a handcrafted ceramic serving platter from a local artisan, beautiful but neutral, neither overly personal nor coldly generic. For Michael, Martha chose a leather-bound journal, remembering how he had always processed difficult emotions through writing even as a teenager. For Emma and Jason, she selected gifts that reflected her growing understanding of their evolving personalities, a professional quality soccer ball for Emma, and a comprehensive field guide to Atlantic marine life for Jason. The Silver Bay Winter Art Show opened the Saturday before Christmas, transforming the community center into an elegant gallery space. Martha stood beside her displayed seascape, simultaneously proud and self-conscious, as residents and visitors from neighboring communities circulated through the exhibition. Walter appeared at her elbow, looking distinguished in a charcoal sweater she hadn't seen before. "Your painting has drawn quite the crowd," he noted, gesturing toward a small group gathered before her canvas. The community director was particularly impressed. Martha felt a blush warm her cheeks. "It's just a hobby," she demurred. "Nothing like Clara's work." Walter's eyes held hers steadily. "Value isn't measured by comparison, Martha. Your art speaks because it's authentically yours, not because it resembles anyone else's." Before Martha could respond, a familiar voice cut through the ambient gallery noise, sending a jolt of shock through her system. Michael stood a few yards away, Jason and Emma flanking him, all three bundled in winter coats dusted with fresh snow. Surprise Emma called, breaking away to rush toward Martha with characteristic enthusiasm. "Daddy said your painting was in a real art show. We had to come see." Martha embraced her granddaughter automatically, her mind still processing the unexpected appearance of her family in her Silver Bay sanctuary. Walter squeezed her elbow briefly before stepping back, a silent message that he would give her space for this reunion while remaining nearby if needed. Michael approached more slowly, his expression a mix of uncertainty and determination. Jason clung to his hand, eyes wide, as he took in the crowded gallery. Emma, always the family diplomat, grabbed Martha's hand and pulled her toward the displayed seascape. "Is this one yours, Grandma?" "It's beautiful. It looks exactly like the beach where we built sandcastles." Martha found her voice kneeling to Emma's level despite the protest from her knees. "Yes, that's mine. I'm so surprised to see you all here. How did you know about the show?" Michael cleared his throat. "I've been following the Silver Bay community newsletter online. When I saw your name listed among the artists, I thought it might be nice to support your new interests, to see this part of your life." The simple admission that Michael had been keeping tabs on her activities, taking initiative to learn about her new world, touched Martha unexpectedly. She straightened, meeting her son's gaze directly. "Thank you for coming. It means a great deal." Jason tugged at his father's sleeve, whispering something that made Michael smile. "Apparently someone's more interested in the refreshment table than fine art," he explained with a fond eye roll. Martha pointed the way, watching as Michael guided Jason toward the promised cookies. Emma remained by the painting, studying it with surprising intensity for a 10-year-old. She turned to Martha, her expression suddenly serious beyond her years. "You're happier here, aren't you, Grandma? Your eyes look different in all the pictures Daddy takes when we're at the park. And you laugh more." Martha blinked back unexpected tears, struck by her granddaughter's perceptiveness. "Yes, Emma, I am happy here, but I'm always happiest when I get to see you and Jason." Emma nodded, absorbing this information with the straightforward acceptance of childhood. "Mom says you left because she was mean to you. She said she has to learn to be nicer to people, especially family." The candid revelation of Jennifer's words to her daughter left Martha momentarily speechless. Before she could formulate a response, Michael returned with Jason, who clutched a paper napkin filled with Christmas cookies. The moment for further conversation with Emma passed, but her words lingered in Martha's mind throughout the remainder of their visit. After touring the entire exhibition and meeting several of Martha's Silver Bay friends, Michael and the children prepared to leave, citing the increasingly heavy snowfall and the hour-long drive home. As they said their goodbyes near the entrance, Michael hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small envelope. "Before we go," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "Jennifer asked me to give you this. She thought it might be better if you read it before Christmas Eve." Martha accepted the envelope, her name written across the front in Jennifer's distinctive angular script. "Thank you," she managed, slipping it into her pocket without opening it. "I'll see you all on Christmas Eve." Once they had departed, Martha found Walter waiting patiently near the coat check. The unexpected family visitation had left her emotionally drained, yet strangely exhilarated. "I need some air," she told him, retrieving her winter coat. They walked together along the sheltered boardwalk that extended behind the community center. Though the wooden path had been cleared of snow ice crystals crunched beneath their boots, the storm had intensified thick flakes swirling in the security lights that illuminated the walkway. The churning ocean beyond the railing was invisible now, its presence announced only by the rhythmic crashing of unseen waves. Martha finally withdrew the envelope from her pocket, turning it over in her gloved hands. Walter maintained a respectful silence, giving her space to decide whether to open it now or later alone, or with him as witness. With a deep breath, Martha broke the seal and removed a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. Jennifer's neat handwriting filled the page. Martha angled the letter toward the nearest light fixture and began to read. Walter moved slightly away, providing privacy while remaining close enough to steady her if needed. The letter began formally, "Dear Martha," rather than the impersonal Eleanor Jennifer had always used previously. It acknowledged without excuses or justifications the pattern of disrespect and unkindness that had characterized their relationship. Jennifer described her ongoing therapy, explaining how she was working to understand the roots of her behavior in her own complicated relationship with her mother and mother-in-law. "I don't expect immediate forgiveness," Jennifer had written toward the end. "I'm not sure I deserve it, but I am committed to changing not just for Michael and the children, but because I don't want to be the person I was becoming. I hope Christmas Eve might be a small step toward a different kind of relationship between us, one based on mutual respect rather than resentment." Martha folded the letter carefully, returning it to its envelope. She stood motionless, snow accumulating on her shoulders and hair, as she processed Jennifer's words. The apology seemed genuine, the self-reflection substantial. Yet Martha couldn't quite dismiss the lingering suspicion that Michael might have prompted or even drafted the letter himself. "You're overthinking," Walter observed quietly, breaking his silence. Martha glanced at him, surprised by his accurate reading of her thoughts. "People can change when properly motivated," he continued. "Loss is a powerful teacher. So is shame when it leads to genuine self-examination rather than defensiveness." Martha brushed snow from her coat sleeves, considering his perspective. "I want to believe she's sincere," she admitted. "For the children's sake, if nothing else. But forgiveness feels like such a risk after everything that happened." Walter turned to face her, fully snowflakes catching in his silver hair and eyebrows. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting or even reconciling. It's releasing the anchor that ties you to the injury. You can acknowledge the harm done without allowing it to determine your course forever. His words resonated with the lessons Martha had been learning through her Tai Chi practice about balance flexibility and redirecting negative energy rather than absorbing or reflecting it. Perhaps Jennifer's letter offered an opportunity to practice those principles in the most challenging context imaginable. "I'll give her a chance," Martha decided aloud. "One chance to demonstrate that her words match her intentions." Walter smiled, the expression warming his wind-reddened face. "That's all any of us can ask for. Now shall we get inside before we turn into snowmen, the temperature's dropping by the minute." As they hurried back toward the community center, Martha felt an odd lightness despite the serious conversation. Jennifer's letter had created a path forward that hadn't existed before. Not an easy path, certainly, but a possible one. And possibilities, Martha was learning, were precious commodities at 72. Christmas Eve arrived with picture-perfect seasonal weather, crisp clear skies, and just enough snow on the ground to satisfy holiday traditionalists without impeding travel. Martha spent the morning in careful preparation, styling her hair, selecting her outfit, and wrapping the family gifts. Walter had arranged to pick her up at 5:30, allowing ample time for the 40-minute drive to Michael and Jennifer's new home in Lakeside Heights. As Martha applied a final touch of lipstick, her phone chimed with an incoming call. She expected Sarah with last-minute moral support, but instead saw Dr. Lee's office number on the screen. Puzzled, Martha answered immediately. "Mrs. Wilson, we've had a cancellation for tomorrow morning. Dr. Lee wondered if you'd like to come in for your checkup a week early, given the holiday season. Most patients prefer not to think about medical appointments between Christmas and New Year's." Martha hesitated, calculating how a morning appointment might affect her plans. She had intended to attend the Silver Bay Christmas Day brunch with her friends, but earlier test results had shown marginal improvement in her heart function, and Martha was eager to learn if the trend had continued. She accepted the appointment, jotting the details on her kitchen calendar before returning to her preparations. Walter arrived precisely on schedule, looking distinguished in a gray wool overcoat and burgundy scarf. He carried a small gift-wrapped package and a bakery box containing a Black Forest cake, his contribution to the holiday dinner. His appreciative glance at Martha's festive red sweater and pearl earrings boosted her confidence as they headed to his car. The drive to Lakeside Heights passed quickly, Walter's calm conversation about a jazz concert coming to Silver Bay in January, providing welcome distraction from Martha's growing nervousness. As they turned onto Maple Avenue, a quiet tree-lined street of modest family homes, Martha's stomach tightened. Michael had texted the address, but seeing the actual house, a two-story colonial with warm lights glowing in the windows and a Christmas wreath on the front door, made the evening's significance suddenly viscerally real. This is their new beginning, Martha thought, as Walter parked along the curb. Just as Silver Bay is mine. The parallel gave her an unexpected sense of symmetry of balance, restored to a relationship that had tilted dangerously for years. Walter squeezed her hand briefly before they exited the car. "Remember," he murmured, "bridge, not surrender." Martha nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence as they approached the front door. Before she could ring the bell, the door flew open, revealing Emma in a green velvet dress, her face alight with excitement. "Grandma," she squealed, launching herself into Martha's arms. "You came? And you brought your boyfriend." Martha felt heat rush to her face at Emma's innocent assumption. "Emma, this is my friend Walter," she corrected gently. "Walter, this is my granddaughter Emma." Walter bowed slightly, treating Emma with the same courteous respect he showed adults. "A pleasure to meet you, Miss Emma. I've heard wonderful things about you." Emma beamed, clearly charmed. "Daddy, Grandma's here," and she brought her special friend Michael appeared in the hallway behind Emma, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel. His startled expression at Walter's presence quickly smoothed into polite welcome. He stepped forward, extending his hand. "You must be Walter. Mom's mentioned you in her texts." "I'm Michael. Please come in." The exchange was stiff but cordial, exactly what Martha had hoped for in these opening moments. She followed Michael into the house, taking in the modest but comfortable furnishings, the family photos arranged on the mantel, the Christmas tree decorated with a mix of store-bought ornaments and childish handmade creations. It was a home still finding its identity, much like her apartment at Silver Bay. Jason emerged from what appeared to be a small den off the main living room, his greeting more reserved than his sister's, but equally sincere. He showed Martha the marine biology book she had given him at their last meeting, pointing out the species he had identified during a school trip to a local aquarium. As Martha engaged with Jason, the kitchen door swung open, revealing Jennifer. She stood frozen for a moment, a serving dish clutched in her hands, her eyes locking with Martha's across the room. The background noise seemed to fade as the two women regarded each other for the first time since that fateful dinner party nearly 8 months ago. Jennifer broke the tableau first, setting the dish on a side table and crossing the room with measured steps. She stopped a respectful distance from Martha, her posture neither confrontational nor submissive. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. Her voice held none of the saccharine false warmth or barely disguised irritation that had characterized their previous interactions. "It means a great deal to all of us." Martha nodded, acutely aware of Michael and the children watching this crucial exchange. Jennifer's letter had prepared her somewhat, but facing her daughter-in-law in person still triggered a complex emotional response. "Your home is lovely," Martha offered a neutral but genuine compliment. Jennifer's shoulders relaxed slightly at the civil response. "We're still settling in, but it feels right for us. A fresh start." She hesitated, then added, "I received your RSVP about Walter joining us for dessert. I've set a place for him at dinner as well if he'd like to stay." The unexpected hospitality extended to a stranger on a holiday evening seemed to signal Jennifer's desire to demonstrate her changed attitude. Martha glanced at Walter, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Thank you, that would be nice," she replied, surprised by the genuine warmth in her own voice. The initial awkwardness gradually dissolved as they moved through the rituals of the evening drinks in the living room, Emma's impromptu piano recital, the exchange of small gifts before dinner. Martha observed Jennifer closely, noting the effort she made to include Walter in conversations, to serve Martha first at the table, to reference shared family memories, in ways that acknowledged Martha's central role in them. These small courtesies might have seemed performative, except for the moments when Jennifer didn't realize she was being watched, the absence of eye-rolling when Martha spoke, the attentive listening rather than impatient interruptions, the genuine smile when Martha complimented her cooking. After dinner, while Michael and Walter cleared the table and the children prepared for the promised Christmas movie, Martha found herself alone with Jennifer in the kitchen. They worked side by side, packaging leftovers and loading the dishwasher, in a silence that gradually shifted from strained to companionable. "I received your letter," Martha finally said, closing the refrigerator door and turning to face her daughter-in-law. "I appreciated your honesty." Jennifer met her gaze steadily. "I meant every word. This isn't just about family harmony or making Michael happy. It's about becoming someone I can respect when I look in the mirror." The raw candor of her response caught Martha off guard. "What changed?" she asked, genuinely curious rather than challenging. Jennifer leaned against the counter, her expression thoughtful. "Therapy helped me see patterns I was blind to before. How I've resented and pushed away older women in my life, especially those with any authority or influence over me." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture Martha had never seen from her before. "My own mother was difficult, highly critical, emotionally unavailable. I think I've been punishing her through other relationships for years." The admission revealed layers of complexity Martha had never considered. Jennifer had always seemed so confident, so self-assured in her judgments. The vulnerability now evident in her posture and voice transformed Martha's perception in ways she couldn't have anticipated. "Thank you for explaining," Martha said softly. "Understanding doesn't erase what happened, but it helps create a path forward." Jennifer nodded, relief evident in her features. "That's all I'm asking, for a path, not instant forgiveness." She hesitated, then added, "The kids need you in their lives. Michael needs his mother. And I need to learn how to have healthy relationships with the women in my family. Starting with you." The sincerity in Jennifer's voice, the absence of the defensive edge that had characterized all their previous interactions, convinced Martha that this change might be genuine rather than strategic. As they rejoined the others for the promised Christmas movie, Martha felt a subtle shift in the emotional atmosphere. Not the complete dissolution of past hurts, but the tentative foundation for something new and potentially healing. Walter caught her eye as she settled beside him on the sofa, raising a questioning eyebrow. Martha gave a small nod, signaling that the kitchen conversation had gone well. His answering smile warmed her more than the cup of hot chocolate Michael had pressed into her hands. The evening concluded with promises of another gathering, soon perhaps New Year's Day brunch at Silver Bay, where Martha could show the children the community's indoor pool and game room. As they prepared to leave, Jennifer surprised Martha with a brief but genuine hug. "Baby steps," she whispered, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Baby steps," Martha agreed, finding herself unexpectedly moved by the gesture. The drive back to Silver Bay unfolded in comfortable conversation, Martha and Walter dissecting the evening's successes and lingering tensions. The Christmas lights of passing homes reflected on the car windows, creating a magical, slightly surreal atmosphere that matched Martha's emotional state. Walter pulled into the Silver Bay parking lot just after 10 o'clock. The building's tasteful holiday decorations welcomed them home, reminding Martha of how completely this place had become her sanctuary over the past months. Rather than saying goodnight in the car, Walter accompanied her to her apartment door, a departure from their usual routine that sent a flutter of anticipation through Martha's chest. At her threshold, Walter took both her hands in his. "You navigated that battlefield like a seasoned diplomat," he told her, pride evident in his voice. "Offering olive branches without surrendering your dignity." Martha squeezed his hands gratefully. "I couldn't have done it without knowing you were there." She hesitated, then added, "I have an appointment with Dr. Lee tomorrow morning. Some follow-up tests for my heart condition. Would you like to join me for the community Christmas brunch afterward? Consider it my thank you for tonight." Walter's eyes softened. "I'd be honored, Martha. What time shall I pick you up?" As they finalized plans for the following day, Martha realized with sudden clarity that something fundamental had shifted not just with her family, but within herself. The Martha who had fled Michael's house in desperation 8 months ago would never have imagined this moment standing on the threshold of her own home, making holiday plans with a man who valued her exactly as she was having, just navigated a family dinner with grace, and emerging with her independence intact. The journey wasn't complete. Tomorrow would bring medical tests and their results. January would require navigating the evolving relationship with Jennifer and establishing clearer boundaries with Michael. The delicate balance between her Silver Bay life and her family connections would need constant recalibration. But for the first time since Richard's death, Martha felt fully present in her own story, not a supporting character in someone else's narrative, but the protagonist of her own life with all its complexity, challenges, and unexpected joys. As Walter said goodnight with a chaste kiss on her cheek, Martha thought of the watercolor hanging in the community art show, her seascape with its blurred horizon and solitary bird in flight. She had painted it during a period of uncertainty when the boundaries between her past and future seemed indistinct, threatening. Now she envisioned a different canvas, the same ocean, but with a clearer division between sea and sky, the lone bird joined by others, and on the distant shore, a small cottage with smoke rising from its chimney. Not Silver Bay Apartments, not Michael's house, but something uniquely hers, a vision of possibility still taking shape, one brushstroke at a time. Martha closed her door, the quiet of her apartment enveloping her like an old friend. On her windowsill, Jason's seashell caught the moonlight, its spiral form a perfect metaphor for her journey moving outward from a fixed center, expanding into ever-widening circles of experience and connection, yet always remaining true to her essential self. The path ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but Martha faced them now from a position of strength rather than desperation. She had reclaimed her voice, her dignity, and her right to determine her own future. And in doing so, she had discovered that visibility, true visibility, came not from others' recognition, but from finally truly seeing herself.